All right. So again, we are live here for the final day of your IHS water loss M36 workshop. So for those that are on the line, just a continued thanks for your participation throughout each day of this 4-day workshop. It's been a full week, lots of information that has been shared, both from our team as delivering these key concepts, but also from tribal utility to tribal utility, and then informing our team with Kavanaugh, just learning a little bit more about your different system setups and any unique scenarios. So it's been a lot of information sharing both ways. And just want to say thank you for that continued participation and taking a big chunk out of your week to learn more about water loss and these industry standard methods and tools that we'll be working with. So just a very quick overview of our day today. We're gonna kick off today with some of those common recommended next steps. So once you've gone through all the steps that we've been talking about, we've been incrementally building up through as the week's gone through. But once you've gone through the gathering the data, compiling your water audit, you've gone through that level 1 validation process that we introduced. What are some of those common next steps that we might see that come out of that validation process? Just like everything, the theme is it's going to look different for every utility. Certainly, we've understood that, especially in the authorized consumption, it's very different for all the tribal utilities that are participating in this program. So the recommendations for each utility are going to look very different. But there are some common recommendations. Again, our team, we've done lots of water audit validations, and we see some common recommendations, especially with utilities that are embarking on this for the first time. So those recommendations may be real, tangible, actionable steps. They may be related to looking at different practices and policies to consider in your system. So we'll take a look at that. These today are going to be focused on supply meter testing, customer meter testing, and we've added a little bit to the unmetered authorized consumption, just understanding a little bit better on the on hearing from you guys and your specific utility setup. From there we're gonna pivot. We want to make sure that we give a good rounded review of everything that has been delivered here in the workshop. So just reinforcing some of those key concepts, all the way from starting at that big picture that we looked at the morning of day 1, all the way to these recommended next steps. So a good round review of our course material this week. You may be wondering, beyond, in addition to some of those common recommended next steps, what are some of the things that you can be doing beyond the audit? We mentioned that saving, just completing the water audit, unfortunately, is not going to save a drop of water. It's going to inform us of some of our next steps. But we'll talk about, we'll kind of pull the curtain up on a little bit and show what are some of those things that beyond the audit you can start to think about. Some folks have even already had some questions about that. How can they identify their leakage a little bit more detailed? Some folks have inquired of what are some of the site visitations and what can come out of those to help us understand our water loss control intervention strategies a little bit better. So that's great. Keep those questions coming, but we'll talk a little bit about what can be done beyond the audit. That'll probably bring us to our break, and then we'll talk about the programmatic next steps in this water loss program. So That will lead us to a breakout session where you're going to continue working with the instructor you've been with throughout the week. But we're going to introduce the next phase is going to be the coaching phase. So your water audit coach is going to walk you through some good information of how we can schedule some time with each other, regularly scheduled time, and how you can schedule some one-off meetings if a question comes up with your team. And then we'll look at the supporting data that we're going to be asking you to start pulling together, and also how to get that information to us. And from there, I want to give everybody just a heads up towards the end. We do want to, rather than since a lot of the big chunk of today is for review, rather than having a summary review like we've been having at the end of days 1 through 3, we'd rather open it up for some reflections from this workshop. So hopefully you have some new ideas and some new thoughts on water loss control in your system than you had from day 1. So maybe be thinking about that, the comments that you've already shared with us through the evaluations, and just some general reflections from the workshop. We'll do kind of around the horn format there to get everybody's input, not just from the travel utilities, but from the local IHS staff on the line as well. And then from there, we'll move to some closing remarks and the daily evaluation, as well as the post test. So we want to leave you guys plenty of room to tackle those towards the end of the session today as well. All right. So with that, before we go to the common recommended next steps, just want to open it up to the group. If anybody had any questions that came to mind between the end of the session yesterday and the beginning of the session today. And if not, we'll jump right into it. Okay. All right.
Sounds like they're ready to jump into it, Drew.
All right. That's great. So I'm going to pass the mic and the sharing over to Larry Lewison, and Larry's going to walk us through things that we should think about with supply meter testing.
All right, Drew. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Just trying to get situated here with my screen share. Everybody able to see this screen, supply meter verification methods?
Drew, make sure you set the enable on the screen share.
I appreciate that daily reminder, guys. I still have not
Takes a team.
not stuck with me.
Here to go. Takes a team.
All right, Larry, you should be set to share your screen now.
Awesome.
Sorry about that.
Okay, we good to go?
All right. You're actually sharing your presenter mode, Larry. Is there a full screen?
There you go up to your, yeah, I was going to say go up to your display settings and you can switch it pretty quickly. Go back to the one you had. Yeah. So display settings right there at the top menu bar.
Gotcha.
Click on it and say switch, swap presenter view. There you go.
Okay.
Thank
you. Sorry about that, guys. So we're going to take just a pretty brief high-level look at supply meter verification, and included in that high level, we'll take a look at some different methods that we can utilize for a couple of the tests that we saw on the worksheet yesterday. Remember, there was a meter accuracy test, and there was what was called an electronic calibration test. So we're going to look at each one of those a little bit more in depth, get a greater understanding. So just wanted to offer up some key takeaways on this topic as we look at number one would be just the sighting of the meter and the associated upstream straight pipe lengths. That particular takeaway will be more of a one-on-one coaching with your tribal utility, just specific to their particular case. But we do want to make sure that if at all possible, you've got ample straight pipe distance upstream of the meter, therefore having stable hydraulic flow conditions as it travels through the measurement device. And then second takeaway is what I just mentioned with regards to the difference between the meter accuracy test versus the electronic calibration test. Just wanting to add some detail to that. And then finally, just some different ways that we can hopefully offer up different advantages for supply meter testing. So just moving on to our next slide. So what constitutes a meter? The primary device is your measuring element. This shows an example of a meter in this top right corner. That is what is conducting the measurement in this particular pipeline. That is showing up as a mag meter. There's obviously all different types of meters out there. But in this case, the measurement device is a mag meter. Secondary device, which is what is referred to as a register or a transmitter. This is what converts and communicates the measurement that's coming from the meter, and then into the secondary device, the transmitter. In this case, we're showing a Venturi meter, and that is connected to a transmitter, and in that particular case would be a differential pressure transmitter, or at least accepting the measurement as in the form of a differential pressure. But what the transmitter does is essentially converts the measurement into a 4 to 20 milliamp signal. And that is the signal that we're going to get into a little bit with regards to electronic calibration, and talk just slightly more detail to that. When we talked about this yesterday as it related to checking your data for on the secondary device secondary and tertiary levels. This is kind of a description of those different levels where we're checking that 4 to 20 milliamp on a secondary level, making sure the 4 lines up with 0 flow, the 20 milliamps lines up with maximum flow or maximum capacity. And then on the tertiary level, we're looking at the database. So this is typically in a SCADA system where there is a historian or some sort of database that's managing the information that's coming from the secondary device into a control panel and what you're seeing on a readout display. So just a further check of that information. So now we want to take a little dive into accuracy testing versus calibration. Oops. Messed up. Sorry, apologize for my mistake there. Accuracy testing versus calibration. So we talked about these two aspects within the worksheet. Accuracy testing, meaning you're doing a physical test on the meter to check the measurement device. And just a minute, we're gonna talk about the different types of ways that you can perform that test. But as we saw in our example worksheet, they tested their 3 meters and came up with an accuracy percentage based on one of those methods. So that is what we're after under the accuracy testing. For electronic calibration, this is where we're looking at the signal that's coming from the meter through the transmitter. We're checking that 4 to 20 milliamp signal. calibration versus test, you could probably use those in a similar vocabulary there. Calibration kind of seems like a verb to me, like you're actually making an adjustment. And when that test or check is done on the electronic signal, sometimes there is a calibration that is done to adjust that. For instance, 4 milliamp signal that should say zero flow. And if it's not during that check, it will likely be checked or will likely be calibrated or adjusted back to a zero flow measurement and zero it out. So each of those produces a separate test report. We looked at the one for accuracy report yesterday, and calibration we looked at an example for. And so those are two separate items. And then third, we just talked about looking at the database relative to any potential anomalies or errors in the SCADA information. So perhaps SCADA might go down for a period of time and you don't have any recordings of your information. That would be kind of referred to as a data gap. So just looking for any zeros, any replications, any points in time that you may have some errors in the database itself. All right, last slide here, looking at different types of supply meter testing. So an insertion type, we saw a picture of this, I think on the first day Will showed an insertion probe being placed through a tap in the pipe downstream of the meter. Once again, sighting of that test point is key relative to getting an accurate test. So we want to make sure that we've got suitable straight pipe distances, no bends, no fittings, anything between the place where we're going to test the measurement of the meter and the meter itself that we're testing. Clamp on, this is a non-invasive type test, usually using an ultrasonic device and something that you don't have to poke a hole in the pipe, which is a big advantage. However, you do have to make some assumptions in this type of test, such as thickness of the wall of the pipe itself, temperature of the water. Those are just a couple examples of assumptions that you have to make for this one. Comparative analysis or apparatus. This is having a separate calibrated meter that is connected to the measurement meter. We're pulling water out after the measurement meter and then comparing the two readings for any potential difference there. Volumetric displacement. This is what we commonly refer to as a drop-down test or a drawdown test. If you have a storage tank near where your finished water meter is, this can be utilized to drop a known volume from a clear well or a storage tank and basically flowing that through a finished water meter and then just comparing, getting flow rates and then comparing the actual volumes between those two applications, meaning the storage tank and the meter itself. Very, very easy to do if you have the setup to do it. Last one, factory bench test. I think we hit this on day one as well with regards to not always the best method to utilize because they're using just ideal conditions to test those meters, not the in situ type test where you can run into different complications with hydraulic flow conditions being disturbed. That's just an example of one, but top four would be the preferred methods to test a supply meter and get your results utilizing one of those. So this is just a quick summary. just to look at the different advantages and limitations of each one of these sites or each one of these methods, kind of just cap that up. But this will be something nice for as we go through our coaching sessions and what might be most applicable for each of the utilities that utilizes supply meters. And typically it's going to be one of these three that might be most applicable towards your situation. And in particular with the insertion type, you've got to have that downstream pipe length, a straight pipe length, in order to get a good test site, is the key takeaway there. Same thing on any of these, actually, maybe with the exception of the volumetric displacement. But certainly with clamp on, if you have access to the pipe, and once again, you've got good downstream straight pipe distance, you can easily perform that test without having to put a hole in the pipe. So, Will, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it here in just a few seconds and get ready to hand it over to you for some customer meter testing applications. So
sounds good. Thanks, Larry. While you're doing that, if you'll hit stop on your screen share, I wanted to actually prompt the group. Larry's described a number of ways that a supply meter could be tested, and you can see some advantages and disadvantages that are presented in the 5 different methodologies that one could utilize. I'm curious if anyone on the line, any of the participating tribal utilities have done any of these things, and if so, how did it go? Just maybe a quick reflections from the group. Anybody who'd be willing to share. And I've got this one, I think, back up on the screen now. Anybody tried any of these?
Will, you got a response in the chat? Looks like
Yeah.
Eagle has used the clamp-on method.
Great, thank you. I had my chat hidden, so appreciate that, Drew. All right, so that clamp-on would be this one here. It straps around to the outside of the pipe. Easy to install. You don't have to make a tap. It does have some limitations there that you can't get inside the pipe. If a tap allows you to kind of see inside the pipe and confirm the inner diameter, kind of confirm what's going on inside with the flow profile, but there's some trade-offs there. Looks like Trish question on what are upstream and downstream pipe lengths. Those are basically how many diameter lengths or how far upstream on the pipe run ahead of the meter or downstream from the meter do you have with a straight run of pipe without a bend, a valve, or a fitting or a pump, something that would maybe create hydraulic disturbance. And so this issue is an issue that exists with all meters. Some meters need more undisturbed runs of pipe ahead of it and after it, and other meters, they handle it better if you don't have quite as much space, but some meters need 10, 20, 30 diameters of the pipe upstream before, without any sort of disturbance in the flow conditions. So the plumbing around how our meters are installed ends up being pretty critically important. And as Steve said earlier, I think yesterday, we all have inherited these systems and these conditions. We probably weren't the ones that made the decision on that plumbing and how the piping configuration is laid out. That decision was usually made a long time ago by others. So we're kind of dealing with the conditions that we've got. So part of assessing what's a good approach is kind of starts with doing a site visit and looking at the upstream and downstream runs and determining if you feel like there's a pretty good amount of space without a disturbance upstream, downstream. And if not, kind of, assessing what your options are from there.
Well, I might pipe in with one thing with regards to hydraulic disturbances, in the sense that there are some ways to mitigate flow disturbances within the pipe. without having to move the meter. And sometimes you can utilize a flow conditioner, a flow straightener within the existing piping alignment that helps to, yeah, great. These are some examples of what those would look like. Flanged fittings, within a foot or two, or less than that even sometimes, being able to help channelize the flow and getting it back to where there is no vortices or swirl type applications going on within the flow stream, which is what really tends to mess up the flow measurement.
Yeah. Good deal. I know we had some content. We're keeping it fairly high level, Larry, and didn't get into some of this, but since it had come up, I wanted to throw that up on the screen.
Yeah.
Great. It sounds like my group have done some clamp-on testing, and so for others, that's definitely going to be a topic of conversation working with your coach, because this is a common next step, and so it's likely that each coach will be working with their utilities to really talk about what would that look like and helping to maybe plan out next steps about supply meter testing in your system.
Just a quick comment. I know some folks have mag meters and also ultrasonics. Just maybe a reflection on that of, hey, those are highly accurate. Do you need to test them, and why?
Sure. So it is a question we do get. I was going to show a couple good example pictures, Steve. You do need, there is no meter that is immune. Some meters handle it better than others, but there's no meter type that is immune from disturbed hydraulic conditions. So here's a fun one. If you can find where the meter is in this picture, it's in the middle of this apparatus setup, and so the well piping is coming out of the ground, meters above ground, it goes back down, and the upstream downstream clearances needed are 5 to 10 pipe diameters, and what's actually there is probably maybe 1 pipe diameter, if that. So right after this meter, there's a 90-degree bend. So Steve, even with mag meters or more newer technology meters, these types of issues can create error in the meter reading. And this is our breakout group had a great discussion about in situ testing, also known as just testing it in place. Why can't you take it out and maybe have the manufacturer do the test? This type of issue is exactly the reason. Is that sometimes the meter is doing fine. It's not the meter that's the problem, it's the installed condition and the hydraulics that are happening at the meter location. So it's the plumbing that's the problem, not the meter. And you don't know that unless you perform a test in its installed conditions. So that's definitely a common question we get, and an important one. So usually the only people I hear say that their meter will perform in any scenario is the guy trying to sell me the meter. So buyer beware is one of the caution points there for sure. All right.
I think Ross has his hand raised for a question.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Ross, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, in that scenario you just put the picture up, but where would you put your your test meter, your clamp on, or your
Yeah, it's a great question. The short answer is nowhere that's seen in this picture.
Okay.
You're gonna have to go, yeah, you're gonna have to go in the yard, maybe 20 feet this way, excavate and make your tap, and hopefully it's a scenario where it's maybe 3 to 5 feet deep and the excavation is not that big of a deal. If it's super deep, then maybe you might look upstream. But the key point is you got to find, it's as important that your test meter location is reliable. That's equally as important, because if you have a bad test location, then your test isn't worth anything. So
Right.
It's a great question. Yeah, sometimes you have to dig a hole and find a new spot somewhere down the line a little bit.
And while you're at it, put your regular meter there too.
Exactly. Yeah, those tend to be a little more the replumbing projects. Those are more in the capital, so they may not happen this month, but maybe they can get programmed in to happen over the next year to 2 years or that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
again, these are sometimes decisions that were made 30 years ago, and so it may take you a little while to rectify some things that are, so that have been there a long time. But once you get it fixed and you get a good test location, then you're set up. Then you can test it over and over, year over year, and you're setting yourself up for success there.
Right.
Yeah, good questions all around. Any others? All right, thanks team for monitoring the chat and the hands for me. All right, let's go to, I want to go to touch on another common next step that we run into that we typically encounter. And it deals with customer meters, and we want to acknowledge up front that not every tribal utility who's participating in this program has customer meters. So if you don't have customer meters, this part you don't need to worry too much about right now. But there are some tribal utilities in this program that do have some customer meters that are generating revenue. And if you're in that scenario, this is an important part of your overall water loss strategy. And the reason is that how well you understand your apparent losses, it really can impact how well you understand your leakage, because those two numbers work together in the water balance to, it's a water balance process of elimination. So you're estimating this apparent, and your real losses become what's left over. So if you don't have a great idea of what's going on with your meters, then that can have a big impact on how effective you can be on your leakage management program. So I'm going to give the 30,000 foot flyover of a next step customer meter testing activities. It's really meant to understand get better insight into how the meters are performing, first and foremost. That also might inform how you replace the meters. And in our breakout group, we had at one point a discussion about, well, manufacturers sort of recommended guidelines is maybe every 8 to 12 years to replace some of our meters that are on our metered customer connections. And just a moment ago, we said buyer beware of the folks that are selling you meters. They're going to have their guidelines, but you also want to prove to yourself of how they're doing. And we have seen in many a scenario where some testing informed the utility that even after 12 years, meters are doing fine. And they could even get 15 or 20 years of life out of their meters. And it's really, testing is important to help make those good long-term decisions. It also helps in the short run, because if there's revenue being generated and it is a billed customer, then you want to make sure the accuracy of that water bill is as good as it can be. So flying over in a pretty high altitude, it really involves figuring out how many we want to sample, doing the testing, and analyzing the results. It's important to do a representative and random sample. That's in many of the tribal scenarios. I think what we'll run into is that the total number of meters is not going to be huge. And so a sample size big enough really isn't going to take that many meters. This is actually a significant advantage for small systems, is you don't have to have such a large testing effort to really figure out what's going on and kind of make decisions based upon that. So working with your coaches in the one-on-ones, we'll look at how that would play out in your scenario. How many meters do you have? Would a handful do? And what would that look like as a potential next step? In terms of the testing activities, typically it's something that's performed on a bench. A good testing setup would have a tank beside the bench, and the displacement, it's kind of like the drop-down test Larry was describing on a supply meter test. You have a displacement of volume, so that's a known quantity. You're passing it through these meters, comparing it to what the meter is registering, and doing the comparative difference. That tells you how the customer meter is performing in terms of accuracy. Key things are testing them in the same condition that they have been installed out in the field. So some typical pitfalls are, if you pull a meter for testing and you leave it on the back of the truck for 3 days, or you bring it into the shop and you rinse it out really good and get all the dirt out of it before you test it. You're changing the condition that the meter has been living in, and you don't want to do that. You want to test it the same way that it's been out there, and that is going to give you the most representative understanding of how it's been performing. Once you do that, you get results and can kind of put them in a table and sort of look at what the overall accuracy results are shaking out to be. Again, this is high level, so we're not getting too far into it, but typically you got a low, medium, and high flow rate that you might test it at. You then need to translate that into a result, and we now remember yesterday we were doing those weighted averages on a couple of our problem examples where we had more than one result and we needed to translate it into a composite result, a single number. Well, it's the principle behind this is very similar. You do it on a volume weighting and low, mid, and high flows. And so there's some guidelines and some guidance that we will be able to provide and be helpful to you on those types of calculations. But the key is got to have some data to work with. So in the end, a small meter testing program can get you a good understanding of how your whole small meter stock is performing by doing random sampling, doing weighted averages across the different flow rate test results, and using that to then translate into your water audit. Remember, in the water audit, there is one box for customer meter inaccuracy. And so all of this activity can help you be informed and move from, well, we think the meters are doing okay, and so we're just going to guess 1% or 3%, you know, some sort of number you're pulling out of the air, to having something that's a bit more scientifically based. You got data to really dig in. So those are on residential meters. I'm going to just quickly touch on bigger meters. Let's say it's the casino or a larger customer account, an industrial account. Typically, these are a lot fewer, maybe just a handful in your system. And usually you can kind of take them on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes people just say, hey, if this is one of our higher or highest revenue generating meters, then we're just going to test it every year. And we want to keep monitoring a close eye on how that one's done. So that's these actually end up being a bit sometimes a bit easier to deal with because you don't have quite as many. The trick is the size. So it depends if you're into the maybe 3-inch meter, 4-inch meter. If you get really past much more than 2-inch, it's not quite as much a bench test anymore as it is a field test. And there are apparatuses that mount to the back of a truck and you can utilize to perform these types of tests. So that's the high level of a little bit of the difference between small meters and large meters. Small meters, you tend to have more of them. Large meters, you have fewer of them, but sometimes they are actually generating more revenue. So you just sort of approach them as two different animals and approach your or design your program accordingly. So that's applicable for those tribal utilities that have meters and meters that you are billing your customers based on. I would argue that even if you're not billing your customers based on them, but they are metered, you still want to consider some type of testing activity for the purposes of estimating the apparent losses in your water balance, just for confidence in how that number is going in, because that number is also affecting your leakage estimation in your water balance. So testing is an important activity if you have any meters at all on your customers, even if you're not billing them. The last piece I'm going to touch on is for those unmetered customers. So everything we just talked about was for customers that have meters. Well, we also have a lot of participants in this program with customers that don't have meters. And so a common next step that we're going to expect in this program working together is that you're going to need to be able to look at how are you estimating those numbers and how potentially could those estimations be improved and refined over time. Before I go there, though, let me pause and ask, maybe for those utilities that do have some customer meters, did this bring up any immediate questions on the small meter testing discussion or the large meter testing discussion? I'll pause for a moment. questions in the chat or come off mute.
Yeah, this is Ross. Just one thought, I guess, on having in my mind as you're talking about supply versus the customer meters. We've got some bigger systems that on the supply side are producing several hundred gallons a minute, but we also have, with managing 29 public water systems, we've got a few of them that are very small, and we have more residential size meters on those. We might have some of them even have a 5/8 by 3/4 on the production side. We're only pumping 10, 15 gallons a minute. Some of them have 1 inch or 1.5 inch meters. So what you were talking about there for the customer meter testing might be more applicable for us on some of our production wells. And I don't know if any of the other tribes may have the same scenario, but I guess I was having in my mind, Will, that there's a different approach on the supply side versus the customer side, but it sounds like it kind of depends on the size of meter. And I know this program is normally looking at, you're talking about large cities, so supply side is going to be a very high production, but that's not always the case in Indian country.
Yeah, I'd love to hear others if they had any addition or any extra comments on that. Ross, just quickly, one key difference is that you really want to test your supply meters in their installed condition. So that's in situ as installed, versus a customer meter, which it's okay to pull it out and put it on a bench. That would be the only distinction that I would say. But even in the 5/8 inch, it's kind of residential size. If it's on a well connection or something's very small like that, you still want to try to mimic the in situ conditions and test it on site in some way.
You were mentioning some other testing devices for what you call the larger commercial ones, like something mounted at the back of a truck. It sounded like you weren't taking the meter out in those scenarios.
That's right. Yeah, that's more of this type of scenario where there's an apparatus, and you do have a test port just downstream of the meter. And so you're running water through the utility meter, and then there's valved off down below that or past that. And then it actually goes out through a test port into a hose, and that hose is connected to an apparatus. So you basically, and then the apparatus has a test meter kind of built into it. So this is one way that could happen. You can imagine though, if this is the supply line to a community, you're going to need to shut it off for an hour to perform this test. So that is operationally a consideration, but as long as you can find an hour where that's not a problem, fill the tanks up and let it float off the tanks for an hour or something like that. But this is typically how that's to be accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, that would work because you have your storage tank on the system. So having a well down for an hour wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, great questions. Maybe just a quick reflection point of, do others have that where your supply meters are kind of small, really not much bigger than your customer meters? Similar scenario? Giving folks a moment to get off mute if you wanted to chime in. And no sweat if you're not ready to chime in now. That's something your coach is going to be working with you one-on-one and talking through your scenario. Eagle, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, how important is it to have documents like customer class documents, so you kind of have an understanding of the type of usage that our residents are going to have for to get a representative sample of your meters in your distribution system? How important is that, or is it just mostly just kind of a random test?
Yeah, that question does get into statistics a bit, Eagle. And so the way to think about it is you want a random sample, but you also need to, I think in statistics, they call it stratification. you want to think about, if I randomly pull, and I want to then think if let's say let's say in your system, you've got 100 meters deployed and 90 of them are Neptune meters, and 10 of them are I don't know, Hersey meters, and you do a random sample and you pull 15 meters, and half of the meters that you pulled are the Hersey type. That just strictly by chance. That would be an example of where you may actually swap those Herseys out, because it's not, you're skewing yourself towards one particular manufacturer when the majority of them are. So sometimes to solve that type of issue, before you do your random pick, you may create what's called bins and say, well, let's make a list of the Neptunes, let's make a list of the Herseys, and you may do a random sample from each bucket, but sample more from the Neptune bucket because it's 90% of your stock. Just little tricks and tips like that. To answer your question, it helps if you have data on the meter inventory when you're doing that. So as much as you can on certainly the size of the meter is important. The manufacturer of the meter, if you have that, that's helpful. The install date, if that's available, sometimes that can be helpful in creating bins, especially if you've got a whole bunch that were installed 20 years ago and then the rest of them were installed, in the last year. You kind of got two different buckets you want to think about pulling from there. So bottom line, as much data as you can put your hands on will probably make your sampling as effective as it can be, and truly random. All right, Check Eagle, if that answered your question. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. It just brings up more questions. Again, it's one of those type of things. The more you look, the more you're going to find. So
yeah, and that's definitely something we can hit in the one-to-one time with your coach, and thinking through. And that's actually especially important in this case, because there's a lot of variability between the different tribal utilities in this program with regards to what their metering setup is. So we'll definitely do that in the one-on-one. Okay, great feedback. Let me round us out thinking about this topic, which is on our unmetered but authorized consumption. And what I'm going to do is really just set the stage here for some important things to think about. And we really will handle the sort of the nuts and bolts of doing these estimations. We'll work together in your coaching sessions, or a little bit later in the breakout today, we'll talk a bit more about it. But after this week, when we're working together to help build your level 1 audit, that's where we're going to get into it. But let's start with a common ground that we all are going to be working from. We all have a water balance, and so we all need to examine which of these potential unmetered categories are we dealing with. And so all the way to the right of our water balance, let's do a zoom in there on these two categories of unmetered but authorized consumption. And you can see that one of them is in our green section that generates revenue, and the other is in our non-revenue section. It's not generating income for the utility. So typically this is going to be your unmetered but billed customer connections, and this could be that you're billing them based on something. It's going to be a flat rate by nature. The question is, what is the basis upon which the bill is generated? And so that's a core question. Second category is those customer connections that there's a tap off the main, it goes to their facility. If it's a house or if it's a commercial facility, whatever it may be, but there's no meter, there's no bill, but they do have permission to use water. So it is an authorized use. So I do think we have some of that certainly in my breakout group. We've got some of that's at play. So again, we need to think about really the same question of okay, we're not billing it, but what is the basis for making some type of rational estimate, and have that baseline when we're developing the audit. Of course, utility usage and fire usage, these are examples that we've touched on a little bit, and we'll tee that up here in a second. But all three of these different potential examples of unmetered use need a sort of a unique approach to how you're developing these estimates. So I wanted to actually start by asking for those who have, and we'll start here, but if you're billing customers, but it is not, there's no meter on the connection, I'd love to hear, how are you determining what the bill amount is, and what is your current approach to establishing how much to charge them for water consumption? It could be on a monthly or an annual basis. Do I have any volunteers in the class to speak up and share, if you have this, how you're handling that? All right, Eagle, I see your virtual hand up. Tell us about how you guys approach it with Pechanga. And be sure to come off mute. Eagle, looks like you're still on mute.
There you go. Okay, now I'm off mute. There I am. Yeah, I was just almost done with my story, Will, and I have to start over.
I bet it was a good story.
Yeah. No, I mean, basically, you know, the process was through, you know, decision of the water board that basically came to an agreement that tribal members would pay $50 a month and non-tribal members would pay $75 a month. And that was established, you know, years ago and never really touched or adjusted for anything. So for a long time, forever, that's what it's been. Recently, right as we stand today, I mean, we don't even charge our tribal members. So we only bill our non-tribal members, and so it's just a flat rate, even though they're metered or unmetered. It's just a flat rate. So there was not much, you know, data behind the decision.
Mm-hmm. So quick sidebar, you even the ones that are metered, you bill them on that flat rate that was determined at the council level. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we had attempted to do billing by you know, per 1,000 gallons. We do have some rate structures developed, but when we started charging like the casino, we got into this issue where they had some pretty significantly high bills. I mean, they're in the couple hundred to $1,000 a month type of bills, and that really got some eyebrows raised, and then it went, you know, kind of the tribal politics kicked in, and now all of a sudden they have a flat rate. So it's, you know, it's very, you know, it's very political, really. I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's why we don't charge members, is, you know, that was a political move, and that's why we have a flat rate for the industrial users, the casino, because that was another, you know, political decision. So,
Eagle, I'll share with you just a quick anecdote. We were doing this class, it's been a few years, but we were doing this class one time, and somebody raised their hand and said, "Where's the box on the water balance for political loss?"
Yeah,
it was kind of what you're describing. So everybody is my point. Everybody has a little bit of that going on. Real quick, I may ask Nicole, or if any of the other IHS reps have any experience or maybe thoughts on how if you've had to estimate usage on unmetered connections in the tribal scenarios. Love to hear that. While someone is maybe going to come off mute, if you want to speak to that. Eagle, I'll just say that regardless of whether or not you're billing it or whether you're billing it or not, accountability is the first goal here and for the water balance. And so it all comes down to getting a rational basis. And really that's not all that different from rational basis for how you estimate your own uses, like flushing off of hydrants, number of events times a reasonable assumption for duration of the event times a flow rate. I mean, getting some type of rational basis. So we apply that sort of engineering approach with the other ones in absence of any other data on number of connections, rational assumption for usage per month per connection, maybe based on class, and for residential, obviously it's going to be different for commercial. If that is available, it can even get to fixture counts in a building, and that's a bit more advanced and a little bit more granular way to do it. But still, it requires some level of rational basis. Anybody maybe from the IHS team, local reps, have you been in this before where you've done some work and had to do those estimations? A quick pause if somebody's trying to get off mute. All right, no bites on that.
I will.
Yeah,
This is Rolando.
Yeah, go for it.
Hey, so you know, I just came back into the SFC program back in September, so I've not really dealt with unmetered customers or trying to estimate unmetered customers. But in my previous areas that I worked in, those did have meters, and so we were able to establish the numbers there, or identify the number of usage for well productions, and also just the needs of capacity and maybe drilling another well. But for this area that I'm under right now, Albuquerque, I've not used any.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rolanda. Final two final thoughts to close us out here. One is, if you do have any metered customers, but if some of your customers are metered but not all, you can also use that to get a sample and sort of extrapolate that to the unmetered customers. So there's some rational connection that can be made there. If you don't have any metered customers at all, then it just becomes building up a logical, rational formula. And that's what part of our work together will be to do that. The second and the final thing I want to leave you with here is, for some folks, especially if you're not billing your customers at all, you may be kind of looking at this and wondering why, what's the advantage and what's the benefit here of really trying to dig in and make good estimates if we're not even charging these customers for water. And the answer to that is, it is relevant to the efficiency of how the distribution network is running. So if you can do a good job of these estimations for unmetered usage, you're going to have a much better understanding of your leakage. And that leakage, even though you're not charging your customers, that leakage does hit your bottom line as an operating entity, as an enterprise. You are paying for the pumping and the chemicals to treat that water. So if you can improve that leakage, you can reduce costs. So that may be helpful in thinking about, because we got a mixed bag here of different scenarios of incentives. For some utilities, it'll be recovering this revenue that they're charging the customers, but for others, there's not that at all, but it is an opportunity to reduce cost by reducing leakage. So end of the day, accountability and efficiency may be the main driver, rather than protecting revenue for the customer. All right. Well, Drew, I think that gets us to a good spot here. I'm not seeing any more. Oh, we got one more hand up. Let's go, Ross, to you for your question or comment.
Just a comment, I guess, or maybe question, maybe directed towards Eagle. Actually, I understand if your tribal leadership is making the decision not to meter or to have a flat rate or no rate, no fee for water usage, but there's got to be money coming from somewhere to support the operation. You got to pay your people, and takes money to operate these water systems. So one way or another, the tribes are probably paying. I'm assuming in your case, Eagle, you're getting some tribal funds to support your budget and not coming from your customers necessarily.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we're a subsidized department through the tribal government, and even the revenue that we do generate, that goes back to the tribal government, and we don't have any control of that revenue that we make.
Okay, I see.
All right. Well, thanks
Just one
for.
other- I'm sorry, go ahead. We're all talking over each other.
Rolanda, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So I guess based off of what I said before, what would be the recommendations on how? I mean, I think from the facilities that I'm looking at, they do have supply meters. And I'm thinking just the number of homes that estimated that we assume are connected to the system, because some tribes, they do their own connections, right? They may not have proper as-built drawings or provide that information to IHS. So in my mind, it would just be the supply connections, estimated supply connections per home. But are there any recommendations on from Kavanaugh that you could provide for us as how we would estimate the proposed usage water?
Yeah, the thing you just named would be absolutely the most important first data point, which is how many connections are there, and if there's any uncertainty around that, that would probably be a good next step of maybe even doing a field survey just to confirm that. But once you feel good about, okay, we've got X number of connections, Rolanda, there are I think some guidelines we can provide on national averages, rural per household, urban per household, and those types of demand figures, consumption, X thousand gallons per month, that type of deal. It will depend, and we want to learn a little bit more about the individual setups and maybe then tailor those, because as we've heard described, if it's a village setup and not a typical suburban setup, then that may inform some adapting of what maybe a typical rural setting, X thousand gallons per month. And then of course it'll vary if it's a typical home or if it's something else that has irrigation associated with it, those types of things. But yeah, we've definitely got some guidance that we can provide, and we're going to be providing that as part of this program.
All right. Hey, Nicole, looks like you got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So kind of what we ran into with Santa Clara, before I sat on the utility board, I actually worked as their consultant for their water and wastewater systems, the community systems. And what we had done with them was, again, trying to quantify these unmetered connections, but, starting off with an estimated per capita water usage from the region. So there was the regional planning conducted by the state and non-tribal sources, but kind of working. So that was our starting point to identify, does it match up with the metered supply that we were seeing from the wells, and then for Santa Clara in particular, this was important because as there are discussions about settling water rights, so then that's when it became more important, to try to identify the amount of water usage for the community water system, but also improvements. It also helped for us to look at improvements to their wastewater system. How much flow they're seeing through the wastewater system and the need for improvements there. So although when we started, a majority of the system was unmetered, it helped with regard to those other discussions.
Yeah, Nicole, that's really, really helpful. Appreciate you sharing that. I think that's, actually you made me think of one more powerful tool in the toolbox here, which is the water balance. and you've got measurement of supply, you've got estimation of consumption, and the water balance helps you to tease out how realistic your estimate for consumption is. Clearly, we don't expect consumption to match supply, because that would mean we have zero water loss. So there is some loss that's expected with every system, and that's where that modeled minimum amount of leakage comes into play, and the audit tool and the water balance can help sort of shine some light on that, to say, well, we're using this for our estimates for unmetered connections, but if we do, then our leakage index is way under 1, or our loss levels are near 0, or negative even. That would be clearly obvious. So those can be indicators that we're overestimating consumption, and maybe help to true that up a bit. So I think putting it all together and refining those estimates over time is the name of the game, for sure.
Good deal.
Yeah, great discussion.
Excellent. Yeah, very good discussion. Giving a little bit more food for thought for those systems with unbilled, unmetered consumption as their primary consumption in the water balance. All right. Well, Will, thanks for walking us through that. I have teed up here everybody's new favorite pastime here, testing our knowledge. I hope you guys have enjoyed this fun format of testing this. I told my daughter the other day that I was like, hey, I'm using this cool thing called Kahoot, and she gave me the old yeah, Dad, that's so 2021. Me and my friends have been using that forever, but it's new to me. Maybe it's new to you guys, but I hope you guys have been enjoying that. All right, so we'll test our knowledge on that supply meter testing segment that Larry gave us first. So get your devices ready. We're going to launch the PIN number here, and again that website is kahoot.it, and once you get there, it will ask you to load in your PIN again. All right. So for verbally,
interesting nicknames today, Drew.
That's right. So the PIN, if you need a verbal cue, there is 2497894. And I'll just remind everybody, we had a pretty close contest yesterday in this busted bracket. Okay. All right. Yes. All right. The nicknames are getting more creative by the second. All right. I'll give one more 2 more seconds there for folks to log in. All right. Hey, at least we're getting some testing our knowledge on these terms that we've been talking about, right? Unbilled, metered, test port, BMAC. All right. I think we're ready to go here, guys. So let's launch the supply meter testing. All right, true or false? Obstructions close to a point of measurement, such as a flow meter, can cause a distorted velocity profile. Okay, you guys were on top of that one. Yes, true. So the different velocity profiles that Will and Larry walked us through, and you saw the image there of a partially closed valve that was certainly distorting that flow profile there. All right, let's go to the next one. Oh yeah, gotta make sure we check out our leaderboard. All right, Nicole is in the lead here. All right, choose a consideration when thinking about supply meter testing. What do we need to think about there? All right. We are not fooling anybody today. Yep, definitely. All of these are considerations: flow rates, test location. Think about that image that Will pulled up, where it was just it was really impossible to get a good test there with that meter location. And then that test duration. We were looking at that example, Ross, that you brought up, and with the comparative analysis. And you know, if we are using that on a smaller meter that's providing some of that, providing the supply, you know, if we need to shut off service there, you know, we want to take that under consideration, not just operationally, but based on the test method, if it really requires a certain duration. All right. Okay. Trish has just squeaked into the lead there. All right, so this will be the last question for our supply meter testing to see who the supply meter testing expert is here. All right, which is not a supply meter test method? All right, man, you guys are on fire today. All right. See, does this
On unbilled, unmetered.
I had to turn on some sound. I'm actually not sure if you guys can hear that sound or not, but if you can, I thought it was a good ad for those on the podium. Okay, so that was the supply meter test. Now we're going to move to testing our knowledge on the customer meter testing as well. All right, so unfortunately this one does have a new pin here, guys, so you'll have to enter in one more pin here. And again, for those that need would like a verbal cue there, the pin number is 688-6562. 688-6562. All right, we'll open it up in 10 here. All right, Ross is in. Okay, let's go ahead and launch this one, guys. All right, if you didn't get in there on time, feel free to use the chat to state your answer. Okay, true or false? In the water balance, our understanding of apparent losses directly impacts our understanding of real losses. All right, great job. Yep. We know through that mass balance approach, that center column in our water balance, not knowing that every column equals the same volume, once we identify those billed authorized consumption volumes, unbilled authorized consumptions or unmetered, and then our apparent losses, then that remainder in the water balance in that column is our real losses. So if there's any, if we made any changes to those apparent losses, it will have a direct effect on the calculation of the real losses or the leakage in our system. All right, we got Nicole in the lead there. And let's see, so this is only 2 here for customer meter testing. Choose all that apply here. So when testing small customer meters, you should always just choose all that you think apply. All right, great job, guys. So we threw in the odd one out there. When we're testing a customer meter, is not always. I guess there is some room for allowance here, but always replacing them with a larger meter is not one of those things that we should do. I suppose if we do discover that the meter is the wrong application for the consumption, then that's a consideration, but it's not something that we should always do. So nice job. Let's check out and see who made it to the top of the podium here. All right, Rolanda in third, Nicole runner up. All right, Eagle, nice job. Way to go. All right, looks like we had straight pipe length in fourth and Jonathan in fifth. All right, nice job, everyone. Let's go to our next section here, and get my screens oriented here. Okay. All right. So again, we've covered a lot of information here in days 1 through 3, and covering a little bit of new information here today with the supply meter testing, customer meter testing, and really good discussion with the unmetered authorized consumption. So I want to take this time. This will take us to our break. But want to review some of these key concepts that we've been talking about, reinforce the learning that we've gained through the workshop this week. So first, want to start with our workshop approach, and just as a reminder, we had some key objectives that we're seeking to meet during this workshop here. Understanding those key concepts with the M36 methodology. Introducing all the participants to the water audit software, and then through common exercise application of the tool. But not only that, but begin to understand, once that water audit is populated, how can we understand those results? So Will showed us the dashboard and walked us through how we can interpret those results in our water audit and what that might mean for our utility. And then understanding what are some of those next steps. So we hit some of those common next steps. Supply meter testing is a common one. Customer meter testing if your customers are metered, but also understanding that if your customers are not metered, one of those next steps is to figure out a way to formulate the best possible estimate in that unmetered, unbilled consumption, and using the water balance as a check, right, of whether our method of estimation is correct or not. So the program task, we're here in rounding out task 3 of our water loss program, and we'll move to the next stage here is coaching. We'll go into that in more detail after the break, but we're approaching this through a prescriptive teaching technique. And so with each task along the program, we're inserting new levels of learning here. And so in this workshop this week, we've been looking at delivering the knowledge of these key concepts, testing our knowledge through the Kahoot games, and you guys have been spot on with each of those, and relaying your comprehension of the information that we're sharing. And then the application through our breakout exercises. That's really, I think, where most people have enjoyed that's the part of the workshop where most people have enjoyed that. It's a level of engagement that's heightened a little bit, and you also get to hear, if you have multiple utilities in your breakout rooms, you've heard a little bit of of how that applies to their utility, and you can kind of hear some of the unique setups and challenges with some of your peers as well. All right, so in day one, this is where we started this big picture approach. In this program, we are focusing on that first box of establishing our water auditing baseline. So that goes with introducing the water audit software, learning how to use it, and then begin using it with your utility specific data. After the break, we'll talk a little bit about these next steps beyond the audit, what some of those might look like. So you can start to begin thinking about once you establish your water auditing baseline and your data validity is at a level that you feel confident with, some different steps that you might consider to getting towards those steps beyond the audit, those technical analyses, performing an economic analysis, all in effort to get better information to make more informed decisions on how to invest in in the most appropriate intervention strategy for your system. All right. So it all started with the water balance here, and we went over this in great detail in day one. And so we learned that moving in this mass balance approach with each column here totaling the same volume, and then moving from left to right, we are systematically accounting for all volumes of water going into our distribution system. And we're doing that either through measurement, through metering, or we are estimating those volumes in some way. So starting with our treated sources entering the distribution system, and we did that exercise where we looked at our different setups and started identifying where are those closest points of entry into our distribution system, where our water audit boundaries should start, and also if applicable, where those volumes of water are leaving our system as well, so we can account for that. We knew that every system setup was going to be a little bit different there. Some people have they're just producing their own water. Some might be exporting a small bit of water, and some might be purchasing some water. So we heard from different utilities that they have different setups, and the key takeaway there was that water loss is a big deal. It is it is expensive, especially in those cases where if we're purchasing that water, our leakage is we're losing that at that purchase cost rate, and so controlling that can help us reduce those costs of that water that we are either producing or purchasing. All right, and so just as another component or another term that we frequently were using in day one was after we understood that our water losses were broken down from a difference of the supply and consumption, we also started talking about our non-revenue water. So looking at that from that perspective, it's made up of unbilled, authorized consumption, apparent losses, and real losses. Even thinking back to the dashboard that Will showed us in that bottom left corner, there was that graph that broke down our non-revenue water components in terms of volume of the non-revenue water and in terms of cost as well. All right. So again, we went through that common exercise where we were working through our water audit boundary, whether we had water exported or water imported or volume from own sources. it's important to understand what are those meters that we are concerned with, that closest point of entry of treated sources into our distribution system. All right, once we understand that, we started talking about introducing you guys to the free water audit software, and started out with, again, asking that question of why have a water audit. And it's really that first step that utilities are taking towards measuring their water losses, quantifying their water losses. Without that, we just don't know what water we're losing. Regardless of our incentive, whether it's our incentive is revenue driven, or as Will suggested with our unmetered authorized consumption, it could be more driven through accountability and just operational efficiency, and reducing some of those costs. So it's that first step that we're taking to quantify our water losses, and I guess knowing a little bit more of what we don't know. So we gauged folks at the beginning of this program to see where you were in the process of understanding the water audit, what your background was, and through the course of this week, we definitely picked up on the sense of excitement to get hands-on in the software. There's a little bit of a teaser on day one with sharing the still images, and once folks got to click around and start entering in inputs into the water audit software, it starts that's where the thinking of how this might work for your utility begins. So Will introduced us to version 6 of the water audit software, and the newest version, and kind of walked us through a little bit of the evolution of the water audit software. It's not a new tool. It's been around for quite a while now, but in each iteration, it's the goal of the software subcommittee with the AWWA Water Loss Control Committee to continue to look for ways to improve and enhance this industry standard tool. Some of the ways that they did that through version 6 were to mainly, it was primarily on that interactive data grading. So we walked through that common exercise where it was very user friendly and also very transparent as to what the practices and policies were, and what those selections were. And your instructor guided you through some of those terms in those data grading criteria as well. But that was the major improvement in this current version 6 that we took a look at. And there were some other add-ons there, like that blank sheet that the common exercise that county water utility took advantage of, and we were able to look at data and manipulate it in real time. And that'll be a great resource as you guys are putting together your water audit as well. So it is, we kind of unveiled the water audit, and the reporting worksheet that you see here is where you'll spend most of your time entering in those inputs. We also walk through all the tabs and resources that are available to you in the water audit, from definitions and then diagrams for service connection setups, and then the blank sheet and the water loss control planning tab. There's a lot of great resources other than the reporting sheet, but that's where you'll be making most of the entries into the water audit software. Not a ton, just approximately there's 13 inputs for most systems that will be applicable to them. Some will be applicable, some won't, but it's not a lot of information to key in. And as you guys picked up, and we'll continue to see that. Probably the greater effort there is making sure that we're gathering the information and understanding if it makes sense and if it's correct before keying it into the water audit software. We spent some time on the results, on the dashboard setting. So that's one thing that we are interested in learning about, of course, is how to interpret these results. starting from what does our data validity mean, that score out of 100, that fighter jet dashboard that Will introduced, what are these percentiles based off of? And now we understand that, these needles where we're seeing our dashboard approach, it's not necessarily how we're stacking up against other tribal utilities, but it's where we fall with respect to other validated water audits in North America. We can see that from a volumetric standpoint. What are our losses in gallons per connection per day, as well as from a cost standpoint in dollars per connection per day. And over on the left-hand corner, that's where we see a non-revenue water profile as well in terms of volume and value. And remember, it's not just that your largest component volumetrically is not going to be your largest component, necessarily your largest component from a cost perspective. It could be your largest component volumetrically is leakage, but your largest component from a cost standpoint could be your metering inaccuracies or something else. So something to keep in mind when we populate our water audit and are looking at our non-revenue water profile. All right, but before we even get to that, we need to Will walked us through some steps on how to develop those inputs. And so there was a 3-step process that we went through, assemble the supporting documents. So we looked at some that are we really need to have to conduct the water balance, right? So our supply data and consumption data. So we have some information that we need to have to run the water audit, but there's also some information that is it's not required, but it's good to have if it's available to us and if it's applicable to our system. So if we have metered customers and we have some test results, that might be something that's good to have, but not necessarily required. But we, as you know, just to calculate our water losses, we do need supply data and consumption data. And so I'll show to what extent we need that in just a second. But once we assemble those documents, we have to we have to look for always making sure, does the data make sense? Are there any errors included or any gremlins that room 3 so aptly coined there that are embedded in the data? They can pop up in any place, and part of this validation process that we're going to work together on, that's going to be one of the things that your validator, your coach, is going to be looking into to make sure that all the data has been brought into the water audit correctly. And then once we have all that, we want to make sure that just kind of run a sanity check and look at the metrics in the dashboard tab of the water audit to make sure nothing is grossly out of range. And if so, what might that tell us, or where in the data might we start to look if we do see something like that? So always just kind of checking, assemble the documents, develop the data inputs, and checking the metrics is our step-by-step approach to picking up the blank water audit. Just a quick snapshot of that supporting documentation. Your coach is in our breakout session is going to go over this in more detail, but there is, just know that, again, to create the water balance, we need to have supply data and consumption data. Metered supply data, if we have it, for our treated sources. If all we have is our raw meter data, or we have a mix, that's going to be our best available data. If we don't have any metered authorized consumption data, we are going to look for that best way to formulate a good estimate for that volume. If we have any supply meter test records, that would be required supporting documentation as well. And then over on the right, we see some good to have, but not necessarily required to conduct the audit. Although I'm going to go ahead and put an asterisk by the system schematic. We've already done that. We've already kind of started to work on that together. But if you already have something that is created and available in your system, I would almost lobby to put that under the required column there, because it's so important when walking through your water supply profile. But that was a beneficial exercise just to get everybody's minds wrapped around of why it's so important to understand which meters we're using for water supplied, and really understanding that that's the number one or the most important water volume going into our water audit software there. And as we're doing this, we learned that we know that there's potential for errors in both supply and consumption. Certainly in the water supplied, there are we have meter wear, poor meter location, and maybe even we don't have the right meter installed for the job. So there's certainly different areas for error to insert itself in water supplied. Just as there is in the authorized consumption as well. It could be in the form of duplicated volumes. Maybe we have some non-potable volumes that are inadvertently included in our consumption data, or maybe we're lacking some information there. But these are all known places for error, places to look, and continuing to ask ourselves as we're pulling together the information, does this make sense? All right. So yesterday we started talking about the concept of data validity, the data validity grades, and that level 1 validation. We always are looking at our water audit results in terms of these 3 V's: the volume, the value, and the validity. We see here again that validity as the biggest cog in the wheel. It's an important part to your water audit. Understanding how reliable is the data that's going into our water audit. So we know if we have a low certainty of data going into our audit, we're going to have a low certainty in the results that it's producing. But through this new interactive data grading process, the software tool is extremely helpful in helping us understand what our next steps are going to be, as far as identifying that there's limiting criteria there. So you saw as we made our selections in those drop-down menus, that limiting criteria started to move around until we finally got to our data validity grade, and it landed where what the 1 or 2 limiting criteria might be for that particular system, and that gives us a roadmap of sorts to understand what practices we might consider implementing into our system. And even if it's not a utility perspective, even if it's from a local IHS staff, this helps us understand, again, some of that operational efficiency, some best practice management that we might consider inserting into our system. And after we go through all those data validity grades, we also learned that even though that data validity score is out of 100, that is not necessarily what we should aspire to achieve in our system, and also not to look at it as an A, B, C, D, or F grade or a failing grade. Rather, we want to look at what our data validity score is, what our reliability in the data is, paired up against our losses, right? So said another way, in that kind of quadrant that you see there in the screen, if we have a high certainty in our data and a low level of losses, then continue to monitor that year over year using the water audit software. But if we have a high certainty in our data and a high level of losses, then we are ready to take some next steps and do something about that. So it's looking at where you are on with respect to your data validity and your current level of losses. All right, and so we again, just the inaccuracy going into the audit is going to translate to the same degree of inaccuracy when we're looking at our water losses and our non-revenue water. So we've talked about a lot of these common sources of error here: instrumentation, human error, just a lack of information can also can put us at a disadvantage when talking about the accuracy of our water audit. But just completing the water audit in a silo by ourselves would just be self-reporting that audit. So Steve and I introduced the concept of level 1 validation yesterday. So this is just a quick pause for your Zen moment of the day. But the Water Research Foundation that we mentioned, they were interested in knowing the answer to this question. So we talked about the kind of the background of level 1 validation, understanding how realistic are these self-reported audits, and is there a formal process that we can use to validate these water audits. So that formal process was documented in one of those Research Foundation reports, and it also detailed what does level 1 validation do and what does it not do. On a high level, that level 1 validation is looking to make sure we're bringing in all the supporting documentation, tracing that back to the input in the audit, making sure it's brought over correctly using the M36 methodology. But it's also ensuring that we are assigning the correct data validity grades and assessment to each of those inputs based on the information that we learn through discussion and interview with the utility. A couple things that it doesn't do: it doesn't go out and test your meter, your supply meter. It doesn't correct any of those inaccuracies in the raw data, and doesn't corroborate any of the leakage that is quantified in the water audit based on any more detailed analysis, more bottom-up approach. Those are certainly available beyond the audit, but that is not part of the scope of a level 1 validation. That is really keyed into making sure the data is brought into the audit correctly and assessing those data validity grades correctly. I'll move through these pretty quickly because we just talked about these, but the supply meter testing, really just introducing the considerations that we need to think about before we jump into it. Understanding the different components of the meter, and what type of testing, whether it be flow accuracy testing or electronic calibration. We need to understand the anatomy of a meter and what type of test it is we want to perform. Will and Larry walked us through these different test methods. There's a variety of test methods out there because depending on your meter setup, some of these test methods might not be available for you, or one of these might be the best available method that you have to choose with. So this is a great takeaway slide here when that we'll share on the resources page on the website. But this is just a good summary slide to help you understand what type of supply meter test might be most beneficial for your setup. Will walked us through the customer meter testing, and at a high level, this is going to help us calculate our apparent losses. If you recall, in the water balance, our apparent losses are made up of the systematic data handling errors, customer metering inaccuracies, and unauthorized consumption. Typically, customer metering inaccuracies, of course, in a setup where the customers are metered, customer metering inaccuracies is typically the largest volume of our apparent losses. So we want to, if we can, we want to make sure we get the best handle on that number as possible. The other two components there are they have a default option, and without further analysis, those are also difficult to quantify. So if we have some information on our customer meter, how our customer meter population is performing, we want to use that information to build it into the audit. So through the small meter testing program, we talked about some of those things that we want to consider. You know, the flow rates at the low, medium, high, random sampling. Eagle had some good questions on what's a good representation of our customer meter population with respect to test results. So a few things to consider there with our small meter testing. Large meter testing is, you know, is similar, but we want to start with, you know, these are typically the larger revenue generating meters. So our biggest users are the ones that we want to start with first when we're considering a large meter testing program, and prioritize that by consumption there. The unmetered authorized consumption here is one thing that we know that is going to be very relevant to many of the tribal utilities in this program. This is whether we're using whether it's billed and unmetered. There's some ways that we can estimate that typical household usage or understanding the number of connections. What if we have some billed metered customers, perhaps we can infer some of the consumption behavior to estimate what some of the billed unmetered consumption is. But if we're unbilled and unmetered, and we don't have any of that data, that billed meter data to go off of, then we need to find another way to estimate that. We know that some unbilled unmetered usage can be uses at your own facilities in your own system. Some of it can be attributed to fire suppression or any other usage where your policy dictates that usage is exempt from billing or from metering. But if your end user, your customers in your community are also unbilled, unmetered, we need to look for ways to estimate that. So that's one thing that we're going to be looking at. You're going to be working with your coaches to pull those estimations together. Okay, let's see. I think that we have just a couple other. I just want to introduce these slides briefly before we head into our break. These are just some areas. If you think back to that big picture approach with those four steps, establishing our water audit baseline, technical analyses, economic analysis, and then finally intervention. These are some of those steps in those three other, or some examples in those three other boxes there that we can consider in our water loss program down the road. But we want to first always start with the water audit, right? Remember our friends at the beginning of day one that were really getting frustrated tracking their water loss as a percent, and then kind of leapfrogging over those first three steps and going straight to intervention. So there's a very high likelihood that they're investing in a intervention strategy that does not fit the loss profile of their system. So each one of those, taking that step-by-step approach, is going to give us better information on how to properly invest in those intervention strategies. So that first step was a more technical analysis. So this could include a detailed data analysis into your billing information down to the raw billing data down to the account level, or it could be performing a real loss profile, a leakage profile there. So what that leakage profile might look like, just as an example, is to separate out your different types of leaks, right? When we think about leaks, we commonly think about the leaks that are coming to the surface, and a member of your community or your staff are alerting you to these leaks. But usually those are just the tip of the iceberg, the smallest part of your total leakage profile. Unreported leakage are leaks that are not coming to the surface, but are also they're typically detectable through acoustic leak detection. There's also background leakage, those weeps and seeps in your pipes. Those are not always going to be detected through traditional leak detection. So the takeaway there is that each of these different types of leakage has a different intervention strategy that's appropriate for it. So this real loss component analysis, as it's termed or coined there, is one step in that technical analysis that you can do beyond the water audit when we're ready to make that step. And you can see again, different types of leakage have different tools that are associated with it, from reported to main and surface replacement to unreported leakage, where maybe we're doing leak detection, and then background leakage, where maybe pressure management is the right tool for the job. In economic analysis, we've said several times throughout each day of the workshop that our goal is not to get to zero leakage. In fact, we would most likely be overspending more than the water is worth, either through aggressive overspending or reactive overspending. So our goal in our water loss program is to find that economic optimum level of intervention. And we can do that through an economic analysis by understanding what is economically recoverable. Again, these are all steps that we would consider beyond the audit, but it's good to start thinking about these, thinking about what steps you might take, further on down the road, whether that's a year or 2 years down the road, but understanding that these are, as we progress through our water loss program, these are next steps available to us. So in economic analysis, at a high level, we'll take what our current annual real losses are, determined through the water audit, and then what is economically recoverable. And so we have that gap in between where we have room for recovering that revenue in our system there. And then the intervention strategies, each of these steps along the way will help define what is going to be the appropriate intervention strategy for our specific loss profile. And it's important to see that we know that by reducing our water loss, that can be beneficial in so many different ways. We often say that the closest and most obtainable source of additional supply is that water that you're losing in your distribution network each year. So we know that these water loss control and management activities can have a real significant cost savings here, and a lot of you guys are starting to pick that up as we've moved through the workshop this week.
Hey, Drew.
Yes.
Drew, just if I can add one quick comment there. I think about just the tribal systems themselves, and looking at putting forth programs for infrastructure improvements. Maybe it's funding packages supporting the need. It's programs like what we're talking about here that carry it through to be able to say, instead of we've got this need and it's very it may not be as well documented. What this process does for each tribal utility is to establish that baseline, as you've been sharing, but also to be able to show, hey, now we can start taking some looks at the economics and then the implementation strategies. So I think about it in terms of documentation of need, and in many cases, I know not just in tribal nation, but in state systems and other utilities, there's an intended use plan, or there's some justification for funding. And this plays in extremely nicely, I see, potentially with the tribes as well, tribal utilities. Just a comment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve. All right. That was a pretty full review there, but it has been a full week of learning. But we also wanted to make sure that we were able to give some of these next steps beyond the audit because want those to be in the back of your brain as you're going through this first step of establishing that baseline, as Steve said, through the water audit tool. Just know that there are some more steps beyond that to really help drive those informed decisions. Let me pause there, see if that review or any or that new information on steps beyond the audit generated any questions from the participants on the line. All right. Okay. Well, we are right at just a little bit beyond that 2-hour mark. So it's a great time for a break. And let's take a 10-minute break and come back. All right. I think we've probably got everybody, there's people back here. So we'll go ahead and get started with the rest of the workshop here. And just as a reminder, this is where we are. So to close out the rest of the day and the week, we're going to move now to the next steps in the program. So pivoting from all those key concepts in the M36 methodology to what is in store and what can you expect for the remainder of the program here. And then we're going to have a little bit of time where we can where you can meet with your coaches. They're going to also talk about those next steps in a little bit more detail and share some resources with you that will help. You're also going to establish a rhythm of times that you can meet and other times that you can schedule some one-off meetings and to discuss any questions that you may have or appropriate data that we'll be requesting. So your coaches are going to walk through the data request sheet that we have, just a checklist of information that we'll be looking for. So those are all things that we'll be covering in that breakout exercise. After that, when we come back to that, we want to, again, we mentioned this at the beginning of the day today, but we want to open it up and again, kind of prepare you guys that we'd like to hear from you guys on your reflection from this workshop. You know, not the stale coffee that Steve keeps bringing to the workshop each day, but just more on you know, your reflection on these concepts that we've been delivering. You know, did they sound like they are going to be a good benefit to your utility? Good practices to insert in your system, and how you might already be thinking about the data collection process and who in your staff that you think you need to get plugged into this process if they're not already. Just generally reflections that you've already been putting a little bit of mind to on how you would like to see out the rest of the participation in this program. From there, we'll have some closing remarks, but we also have a daily evaluation as well as a post test to conclude our day today. So I do want to make sure that folks have sufficient time to complete that in the time frame that we've allowed today, and don't keep you guys past that time. So with that, let me pause there. Any questions on the next agenda items to round us out for the day? Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the next steps in the coaching that we're going to all be involved in. So first and foremost, we shared this at the beginning of the session today as folks were still logging on, but The program website at ihswaterloss.org. This is going to continue to be that hub of information, resources that we've been talking about this week and been sharing on the screen this week, and through those common exercises, the data requests that we are going to be looking for as that supporting documentation to accompany your water audit. That will be on those resources. Recorded sessions that we've had this week are going to also be included there. So just a wide variety of information and resources available to you through the program website. And it's also going to serve as a means for data transfer to our team. So let me just bring that up one more time here on the screen and walk through that, because we did hit most of those earlier here, but I don't know if everybody had a chance to sign in at that point. So this is also a place where if you need to get in touch with us, you have the members of the Kavanaugh program management team over here, as well as Sherry and Ty here with representing IHS. And we got a little bit of information here about the program, but you guys hopefully are all well informed about the program at this point. But the program schedule here is helpful. We'll take another look at this, more detailed look at this in just a moment. But this is helpful to get your bearings and understand what's coming up and what we've done so far. So the next steps in the program are going to be this coaching segment, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But just know that on the horizon, beyond that, we have a segment that we're calling Lessons Learned, where this is where we're going to put a little bit of the task to you guys and understand what you have taken away from this program. Some things that have surprised you, some things that you have uncovered during the data gathering process, compiling the water audit and the level 1 validation process, even things that you guys have observed in the breakout rooms during the workshop this week. This is a great opportunity for the peer-to-peer learning that is always so valuable in these training and technical assistance programs. Learning what other utilities have seen and uncovered, and that may spur you to investigate something in your own utility. So that's all good information, and just know that's coming up down the pipe here for lessons learned. That's actually going to be an installment where we ask you guys to put together, you'll have some time dedicated specifically for your utility to share some of those lessons learned. So we do at that point want to ask that everybody contribute to that portion of the program. And then after that, we've got some closeout training to round out the program, and making sure that continuing to reinforce all of those key concepts there, and then keeping with our approach of teaching and learning, with the knowledge, the comprehension, analysis, and the synthesis and evaluation of all those key components that we're learning about. The resources tab. This is what I mentioned. At this page, after this week, we'll get very busy, and more resources are added to it. Right now, you can see for example, the recording that was there from our introductory session in January. We're going to be adding the recorded sessions after we've had some time to clean those up. We're going to be adding those to the program website, as well as the other materials that I've mentioned here. So that's always going to be a resource for you guys throughout the program and beyond. We're tasked with keeping this program website up and as a resource, even a little bit beyond the program as well. once we what you're going to be talking about with your coaches in the breakout session, you guys are going to be looking at the different supporting documentation that we're going to request, and as you're able to gather that, the way to get that to us is going to be through this upload portal. We've got each of the participating utilities identified here, and it's going to be just a simple add file here, and you can add this either through a zip file, or you can add one file at a time as you work your way through these supporting data files, whatever is comfortable for you. But this will go straight to the Kavanaugh team into our secure Dropbox account. So it's not going to be shared with anyone else, and that's going to be the method of delivery to us.
And Drew, just to comment on that, we still have got some work to do on the upload portal and those landings, correct?
We did, but we corrected that here in in the last few minutes, and got that. This is now fully functional. So, Steve, if you meet with Ross and he's like, I've got this data, I'm ready to go and start giving you some of this stuff, Ross can go straight down here and start adding his information here. It'll bring up your file explorer, and it'll let you navigate to your files and drop them right in there. So this is the upload portal is fully functional right now.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. Any questions on the website? I know it's pretty bare bones, but the resources tab and the upload portal, those are going to be your the best places to visit. Certainly during this coaching phase of the program, and throughout the duration. Those are going to be the areas to look at, but also know that we have our contact information up here as well. All right.
Hey, Drew, this is Eagle.
Yeah, hey, Eagle.
Hey, just a question on the website. So as a partner, will our information always be stored on this website?
Your utility specific information, Eagle, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
None of your utility specific information will be stored on this website. This upload portal is really just a conduit to get your files to the Kavanaugh team.
Okay.
And if it's if data sensitivity is an issue, which it always is, after we've received the data, we can absolutely remove this page and kind of close off that upload portal if that gives an extra sense of security there. But yes, none of it is physically going to live on this website.
Okay. And I think we have some type of document that we may have to have someone sign, just kind of like a confidentiality agreement or something for us to send information out like that. So maybe that's something I'll upload to the portal there, one of my first docs.
Perfect.
The other question I had is, will there be the prior years of our audits? Will they stay on this website for us to go back and review?
So you're referring to if you if you continue to do the water audits beyond, in the future, will your data be saved on this at this website? The answer to that is probably not, Eagle. Okay. But I would absolutely encourage you guys to to keep good records and documentation of your own, of your water audits as you do them year after year. But I would not just count on them being saved, in this, because none of it will be saved on this website. But again, the data is actually coming to the Kavanaugh Dropbox account. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. And as participants, will we always have access to this website?
We are tasked with maintaining this website for, I'll have to double check what that specific term is beyond the conclusion of this program. And I can get back to you and let you know how long you can expect it to be up and available. But I would say also that is, there's an opportunity, and we have some precedents with this and other training programs to simply, if IHS wants to do this, we could simply transfer the ownership of the website over. So that's a possibility too.
Okay. And then one last question. Upon completion of the whole program, will we receive like a certificate saying that that our department is trained or it has reached a level of proficiency in performing water audits?
I'll say that we will be happy to provide certificates stating as much for this training and technical assistance program. Now, as far as the applicability for any continuing education credits, I'm probably not the best person to address that one. Maybe Sherry or Ty could chime in on that, but absolutely, we'd be happy to put together a certificate of completion for this course.
Okay. Yeah. I'm more interested in the certificate, demonstrating that we've gone through this process and something to show like my board of directors that our department worked through this process and we've completed it, and that that we have achieved some level of proficiency for performing water audits. I think that would be a good accomplishment for us to share with our tribal leaders.
Absolutely. And we're going to put everybody's Kahoot total score at the bottom corner of the certificate too.
I'm not worried. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Good questions and good suggestions, Eagle. Appreciate that. All right. Excellent. All right. So we looked at this just a moment ago, and how our approach to this through these, incrementally stepping up these different levels of learning here through our water loss program. And we focused on what we have set out to do and accomplished here in our M36 workshop this week. And so, as you can see here, moving on to what we have here is task 4, the coaching element of it. This is going to continue to insert some different levels there. So as we begin working with your data and with your team members, we're looking now. We're continuing to build on the knowledge. You'll continue to build on the knowledge that you've gained in this workshop. Also, your level of comprehension. Once utilities start using their own data in the water audit, that's when the comprehension and the application really starts to take hold and solidify there. But we're going to be looking at your data and making sure it is applied correctly. So the analysis here We're going to break this down into different parts and look at it, analyze the data, make sure it's being used correctly, and then that synthesis part of it. I mean, that's really working with your various team members, and we're certainly collecting information and processing that. So we're just inserting some different levels of the learning here as we work with you guys more closely and more frequently at this point in the program with your real utility specific data. So we're going to continue to turn the dial up here in our learning, and it's all going to start with establishing your team. Now, most of you on the line, we've had some utilities. They brought in some other folks as they're available to attend this week. For the most part, each of our tribal utilities have had a core group with them, and that is presumably your water loss team. But as a reminder, these are the folks that we want to make sure are engaged and a part of this program. Especially now that we're going to start working with your data, and you guys are going to be tasked with gathering that data and compiling the audit. We want someone familiar with supply metering in your system, someone familiar with customer metering, or however you are estimating or collecting any data for your authorized consumption, whether that tends to be billed or metered or unbilled, unmetered, whatever kind of consumption profile you have, whoever is the most knowledgeable in your system about that information, we definitely want them engaged. So someone from billing or finance, we've learned that we're not only quantifying these different losses, the apparent losses and real losses in our system, but we're valuing them differently. So the way we're valuing those apparent losses, we're valuing at the customer retail unit rate. So someone who's familiar with that rate structure, and then someone from finance or someone else on your team who's familiar with the costs of producing the water in your system. That chemical cost and power cost that we talked about to help us understand the value of our leakage in our system. And then someone from management, someone to understand the big picture of what your utility is doing here and taking that first step to effective water loss control. So establishing the team is key. Here's a workshop we've done in the past, and Will, if I'm not mistaken, that was in your goatee days over there on the far right. But just taking a look at different folks that were involved in this. Some of these we've already named, right? Someone from billing, operations supervisor. Those are some of those that we've already talked about. Someone from management, maybe we have a public works director or a general manager in there, and someone from customer metering. I always think that the communications director in here is an interesting one, because a lot of utilities can be a challenge to communicate how you're addressing water losses outwardly to the public, if that's an issue. So this gentleman here was interested in learning more about water loss control and being able to effectively communicate to his users in his system. But some of you guys have already picked up on this. So you may have noticed, but these all of these comments here are comments that we've been collecting throughout the week here. So this person has already picked up that this is certainly a team effort, an interdepartmental team effort to do this. If you are just one person in your system tasked with gathering the data and populating the water audit, then what we're really lacking there is those team members that are pulling together the data, what their role is in the water loss team. all of these folks have a specific role and an importance to the greater, the bigger picture of your water loss program. So once we have established our team, then we're going to start meeting with our coach. So you're going to establish some frequencies and ways that you can book time with your water audit coach in our breakout session. This is going to be really your coach is going to be at your disposal here. What we're going to encourage is use your coach. Don't sit there and stew on anything. I mean, certainly we've provided those M36 manuals. It is an incredible desktop resource. But also we encourage you guys to pick up the phone or schedule time with us. Those are preferred, so we can have a discussion. But we're also looking out for questions and email to us as well. But we want to really emphasize and encourage to take advantage of scheduling this time with your water loss coach as you are developing the supporting documentation for your audit and putting together your audit as well. And that is not just a one-time deal. We'll have regularly scheduled meetings throughout for each month. Chances for you to schedule time with your coach intermittently between those. But want you to be comfortable doing that at any point in this process. So your meetings with your coach are not just before you start gathering your data. They're while you're gathering the data. It's after you've gathered the data. Any question that you may have, we want to be there to help you guys along. But gathering the data is going to be one step in this process, and we're going to be looking at your calendar year 2021 data. If you have some reservations about that and you want to look at it in a fiscal year, just talk to your coach, and that's fine. We can accommodate that. Just looking at a calendar year 2021 data. If we're all using that, we're all kind of we can all look at the data at the end of the program in the same time frame, in the same light. But if there is one format that is more preferable to you and your tribal utility, that's A-OK there. So collecting that data, your coach is going to talk to you a little bit more about that in the breakout session here in just a moment. All of this coaching segment here is an effort to prepare for the level 1 validation session. So remember the role play that Steve and I did with the level 1 validation. We're going to have a remote setting where it's your water audit coach and your water loss team, and we are at that point. We have your completed water audit. We have all of your supporting documentation, and we're going to be looking at all of it together on the screen, right? And we're going to walk through the water audit, starting at the top with water supplied, work our way all the way down through the cost data. That session is typically about 2 to 2.5 hours long, just to give you guys enough fair warning of how long that'll be and how much time you need to set aside. But the hope is that we have engaged adequately in the coaching sessions, and you guys have taken advantage of that we are ready to go when we meet at this level 1 validation session. The hope is that we will do this and we don't have any homework items as a result, because we have dotted our I's and crossed our T's through these coaching sessions. And we're not learning a whole lot of new information from you at these, but that is typically a result. We do always, through these questions that we have in this interview style process, it usually does uncover some things that are new, and that's part of it. So this is the end goal here for the coaching task is this level 1 validation session, making sure you guys are equipped and prepared to when you come to this meeting. And I'll show the timeline here in just a moment. So here is here's the timeline that we're looking at. So in this task 4 coaching session, we're looking to have conduct these level 1 validations by the end of August, in August 2022. Depending on the rate of putting it together, the supporting documentation, and the readiness that the tribal utility has, we can certainly do that earlier. But we want to make sure we understand you guys have 1,000 other priorities other than putting together the water audit. We want to give you guys plenty of room and space and time to gather this information, but also time to meet with your coach and reinforce that learning, get questions answered that you have, and work to get the best available data and calculations and estimations that we can in our system. All right. From there, you will, after that level 1 validation, you will get a utility specific report. It'll document what was covered in that level 1 validation session. At the end of that, you will have a validated water audit, and you will have some recommendations, some next step recommendations as a result of that water audit validation exercise, and it'll be documented in that utility report. All right, we talked a little bit about the lessons learned and the closeout training, and we'll certainly talk more about those closer to that. But again, just to say it, the lessons learned is where we're going to be looking to the tribal utilities to share your story, your experience, and your journey through this training and technical assistance program, and sharing those observations and key takeaways that you have learned throughout this process. All right, so we're going to head into our breakout sessions, and let me just pause there to see if that raised any questions. Your instructor in your breakout exercise is going to bring up the official water audit data request. So you guys are going to look at that in detail, and some examples of what that supporting documentation might look like. Both of which are going to be added to the resource page, but you guys, that's the main thing that you guys are going to be looking at in your breakout sessions here. But as I am getting everybody in their specific breakout rooms, I want to open it up to any questions that might have spurred, and I'll ask the Kavanaugh team members to help me field these.
Got it, Drew. Thank you. We'll start with any pressing questions from the students, if anybody had one. Sounds like we've hit a few along the way here. All right, there was one that was put into the chat regarding whether or not the IHS reps are going to participate in the validation sessions. The answer is yes, we do want that. And I would say also there are some in these breakout rooms right now, we're going to talk about scheduling some regular check-ins between the coach and the tribal utility. And I'd say that we are hopeful that the IHS reps are able to join any of those that they can, as your schedule allows. So we'll talk through that in the breakout rooms, but definitely want to have good engagement all around from both the core team members at the tribal utility and the local IHS rep.
Yep. Good adds there. Will the regularly scheduled meetings are obviously those are going to be the easiest ones to have the local IHS reps attending.
Yeah.
The ad hoc meetings that are available to the utility, we will absolutely do our best to also include the local IHS staff in those.
Yeah. Drew, let me know when you're ready to send us all away. I'll stop talking. But Eagle, quick question for you. I didn't make the note. Who is your local IHS rep?
That would be, I'll say he's, our guy is, Sean Bush is gone, so I'm trying to think of the new person. He's in Escondido.
Eagle, I have Luke down here, but that might not be correct. Luke,
Luke Schulte?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think Luke's out of Sacramento.
Okay.
I think it's Josh Sims. Does that name ring a bell? Let me see.
Great. What we'll do is if for yourself, Eagle, and anybody else who your local rep hasn't been able to participate in this week's activities, we'll just reach out to them and make sure they're invited to participate in the regular check-ins. Of course, the level 1 validation session that we have in a few months, and
yeah, I think there's still, I think that position in IHS in Escondido is still vacant.
Okay.
So the O&M person that I would probably be dealing with, I don't know if they filled that position yet.
Got it.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's why it's probably Luke.
Very good.
All right. All
Hey,
right.
Eagle,
Great.
this is Ty Antonio. I'll follow up with Luke and Jonathan Sims and Jonathan Rash. I just see if it is Luke for you, and we'll go from there. And I'll get you guys updated.
Sounds good, Ty. That'd be great.
All right, guys. So just we'll quick time check here. I mentioned that there's one additional form that we have for you guys at the end today. So we want to be respectful of your time to finish at the time that we've allotted here. But we'll check in through the communication through the breakout rooms. But roughly we'll spend about half an hour with your coaches and the utilities in your breakout room, and then we'll come back and round the session out.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm gonna send everybody away now. Have a great session, guys. And then if there are any local IHS staff on the line, would love to hear that your perspective as well. So let's first open it up to the tribal utilities on the line to share any reflections from learning about this new information this week.
Drew, I have a feeling that one or two of my utilities want to offer a thought here. Oh, I see the hand up. There it is. Go ahead, Eagle.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better about going through this process. The first time I was kind of on my own, and just I knew it was important. I knew it was a good tool. I just didn't know quite, how to navigate through all the validation questions and kind of what it meant. So for me, I'm excited to go through because some of the stuff will, maybe won't apply to me this go around. And I feel like we've got a better understanding of our usage and production, and that this is going to be a tool that we can use moving forward to help our decision makers understand that we as operators have a great understanding of how the water is being used, where it's going, and that we're doing our best to ensure that we're not losing water and making sure our resource is valuable and is properly used. So I was very thankful to be selected in this process, and I look forward to working with everybody. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Eagle. I see the affirming thumbs up from Will. Great.
This is Trish.
Yeah. Hey, Trish.
we're kind of unique here because we do budget-wise, water and wastewater, and it's combined.
Mhm.
So budget-wise is going to be a challenge to try to pull out water when it's not separated in the yearly budgets that way. So I've talked to the director about that hurdle. And I don't know what we're going to do on that end, to be honest with you. Electrical costs, chemical costs we can get because we don't use a lot of chemicals that we use in water on the wastewater side.
Right.
But personnel and all that kind of stuff is going to be a big challenge. I don't even know if we can do a percentage. So that's my biggest challenge coming up, I think. Trying to figure out how to be equitable for both.
Gotcha. If only you had a trustworthy water audit coach to help guide you through and answer some of those questions, Trish.
I think I have one.
Excellent.
I'm 99.999% sure I do.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, yes, we're learning all these different unique scenarios for each of the tribal utilities, and also good for each utility to hear what other utilities are working with. All right. Any other tribal utilities want to offer anything? All right. Hey, Ross, see your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to indicate that for me, it's going to be quite a mind shift to transition from talking about percent water loss. Our board is used to seeing reports every month on each one of the systems that indicates the percentage of loss we've seen on that system, and then a total for the whole utility. And this is just a different way of looking at it. I guess I'm not even 100% comfortable with it yet, but as we get into it, we'll see how it rolls. But it just feels a little different to be not looking at a percent number when you're trying to evaluate your system and its viability. So I guess that's the biggest thing that's going to be a mind shift for me, is getting away from talking about percent.
Sure. Yep, that's Will, Steve, Larry. We've heard that. We've heard that before, and it's people are comfortable talking in percentages, but we're here to help craft that language and understanding to look at it in different terms of volume and values and validity.
Yeah, Drew, and the thing I would also say is having meaningful dialogue about how to communicate that, to those that are receiving information and used to looking at percentage. So I look forward to that.
Fantastic. All right. Any other comments from tribal utilities?
Hi, it's Nicole here.
Hey, Nicole.
Yeah, I think for us, it'll be interesting. This would kind of be our first, with the utility board, kind of our first activity looking at one of the utilities. I mean, like I had mentioned, we're just starting out. But, this gets the ball rolling at us looking at something more in depth than where we're at. And I know some of our utility board members probably don't have as much information as related to the utility operations. So I think it'll be a good learning experience for us.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Nicole. All right. Hey, John at Fallon Pipe, Shoshone Tribe, is there any reflections or observations you would like to share with the group?
I just think it's going to be a challenge, just because, as one of the other members said, ours is tied to our wastewater stuff. So we're going to have to separate some of our costs out between the two. The one thing is we have wastewater lagoons, but we don't have any actual chemical treatments or anything like that. So
Mhm.
that's, at least that's a good thing. It would just be wages and stuff like that.
Great. Yep. Another unique setup and unique challenge, and also just a reminder that nobody's data, no utilities data is perfect and ready to go, and the first time putting this information together is always the hardest, and the second time is just exponentially easier and better understood putting it together. So. How about any of the local IHS staff on the line, Jonathan, Otis, or Rolanda? Any reflections from your perspective from this week?
Hi, can you hear me? This is Rolanda.
Hey, yes. Hey, Rolanda.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to share that I got pulled into this water loss program, and as soon as I took over as WEDA, and was kind of like, whoa, what am I getting myself into, and what's this about? So it was when I the first class that we presented on, I was just kind of like, what is this for, and what am I doing? And but now going through this process, this workshop, it's really helped me to understand more of the facility that I'm working with, or tribe that I'm working with, and I'm already thinking about how I could use this for another tribe that I work with as well. But looking at myself as the assigned engineer is, what can I do to help this utility company? Water is, I mentioned water is precious. We went through it with the pandemic, and I don't know how many people have seen, but the Navajo Nation was kind of the kind of a historic moment there when it was identified that we had no hand washing sources or water sources. So to me, that's important. I'm Navajo, and so when I work with these tribal communities, you want to try to help what they need to do to improve their systems. Going through these, understanding what the meters, why we want the meters at a certain location, types of meters that we want to install. This really helped me to get a better understanding of how I can assist our utility. I know the challenges of the tribal council not wanting to charge me for meters or water usage, but the utility department that goes through everything that they do to maintain the water system, to provide fresh, potable water to our community members. That's what our program is about. So to me, this really was an eye-opener in understanding the challenges the utility departments are having, but also understanding what my role is on this. And so I'm really looking forward to this. I was kind of a little afraid to know, like, what is this about, and how much more time is it going to be? But it's really going to help future projects, wells that we may be looking at, or meters that we're going to be installing for the utility departments to operate. I think it's going to be challenging, yes, because we are going to have to get the support of the tribal council to understand what we're doing. But also it's going to be a benefit for our community members and for our tribal utility operators when they are needing to improve their systems and make it function, so that they're not having to do fire drills every time when a water line breaks, or when they lose their power sources or whatever. So I'm looking forward to it. So I appreciate the time you guys have given to this workshop. I was a little kind of hesitant at the beginning. I was like, I'm still not understanding this, but going through each of the sessions, and I feel better about it now. So I look forward to working with Trish and Will. So yeah, thank you.
All right, fantastic, Rolanda. Really appreciate hearing that from the IHS staff perspective. Yeah, agreed. I mean, water is, as you said, a precious resource, and there's a you know, there's a cost to delivering that resource to our community, and so we want to be as careful with it as possible, and be good stewards to that resource. Okay, let me do this. Let me open it up real quick. If Jonathan and Otis have anything they want to share, and then we'll pass it over to Ty for some closing remarks for the session this week. Okay. All right. Ty, I'll hand the microphone over to you, sir, and if you would give us some closing remarks and reflections from your perspective as well.
Okay, hi everyone. First off, I'd like to thank you all for participating in this week's workshop. And again, I hope you guys all enjoyed it. And I hope you guys learned a lot this week that sticks with you as we go forward with the coaching session and other sessions beyond this and beyond the water loss program. And I'd like to bring up that Drew brought us up earlier about the IHS water loss website. I did put it in the chat. So if you have a chance today, you can take a look at it. And I do believe these recordings are going to be posted there, what, Drew, like 1 to 2 weeks later after this?
Yeah, hopefully not that long, Ty. It will take us a little bit of time to process them, but should goal to get everything up and posted by the end of next week.
Also, I did put the EHC website in the chat. Again, we do have various other topics available. And I do know at least one of you that reached out to me for cross-connection control that I have coming up. Again, there's lots of opportunities for tribal utilities and IHS folks to jump on there for training. And earlier, Eagle did ask about the question about certificates. For this particular training, since we did go through 16 hours of training, I'll build a Pacific class just for this called M36 workshop training, and I'll get everyone some PDX credit. But if you don't have an HSC account, I'll contact you individually to get you guys set up. Again, if you have any questions during coaching sessions, just go ahead and contact your coach in Kavanaugh, and we all been introduced now to our coaches. And also, please contact your local IHS folks. Well, if you have any questions about the program, go ahead and contact me. I did put my email in the chat as well. And that's about it. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Fantastic. Ty, big thanks to you and Sherry for bringing this program to all the participating tribal utilities on the line and through the remainder of the program. I'm gonna follow suit here and put some other links in the chat. This is going to be our evaluation form. So first in the chat will be the day 4 evaluation form specific to today. So if you would want to go ahead and try to take care of these while we're in the session, and then I'm going to add the post test. Don't worry, it is shorter than the daily evaluation. But the post test is going to be complementary to the pre-test that you guys all took at the beginning of the week. So thanks in advance for that, for completing those. And I will be on the line as folks, if any folks need it while they're completing that, have any questions. But we'll just wrap up by saying, again, a big thanks for a strong week of learning about water loss control. And we are looking forward to continue working with you guys during this program. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, gang, thank you so much. Great interaction and engagement, and we look forward to the next sessions for sure.
Yeah, nice work. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.